I'd like to thank Mike and Renee Lemon for presenting this topic at camp meeting. So I've taken their idea and I'm presenting it here this morning. Here's a question for you. Did you know that obeying the 10 Commandments is critical to our health? I never thought of it that way. But obeying the 10 Commandments is, in fact, critical to our health and our happiness. Deuteronomy 5:29 says, "Oh, that they had such an heart in them, that they would keep all my commandments always, so that it may go well with them and with their children forever." Keeping the commandments, all of them, that it may go well with them. Does that sound like health? It does. And happiness? It does, doesn't it? In the next chapter, and verse 24, it says, "So the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes for our good always, so that he might preserve us alive as it is today." So it's all about our health and our happiness, keeping God's commandments. Well, do you know what the commandments are? Can you say them in order? I have a fun little way of remembering the commandments, or learning them if you don't know them. So if you could help me, we're going to use our fingers. How many fingers do you have? 10. How many commandments are there? 10. All right. So the first one, hold up one finger. The first one is there is one God. There is one God. Only one God, and you need to worship him. All right. 2. What are we going to hold up? 2 fingers. One on each hand. Okay. And the second commandment says, you're not to bow down to any other gods. Okay. Worship only one God. Don't bow down. Don't make any idols. No graven images. Don't bow down. Don't bow down. That's number 2. Number 3, over your mouth. Put it over your mouth. Don't take the name, don't swear. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Make sure you don't do that. Number 4, 2 and 2 make 4, right? 2 and 2 make 4. Put them up here. And remember what? The Sabbath day, to keep it holy. That's today, right? Yeah. Remember the Sabbath day. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 5, honor your father and your mother. Honor your father and your mother. 5 of them. Number 6, you shall not kill. That one finger becomes like a knife. You shall not kill. Don't kill. Number 7. 5 and 2 make 7. There is a man and a woman and a house. So you do not commit adultery. You keep that marriage relation sacred. Do not commit adultery. There's the house, and there's the man, the mommy and the daddy. Okay? Number 8. 4 and 4 make 8. You know, in some countries, when you steal, you know what they do? They actually cut off your thumbs, because you can't grab stuff easily if you don't have thumbs. So people who steal take things that don't belong to them, right? So the commandment says, thou shalt not steal, no thumbs. Number 8, no thumbs. Number 9 is like number 3. Over your mouth. You don't want to say any lies, no lies. Don't say anything bad about your neighbors, all right? And number 10. Number 10, we do it this way because we are holding on to the top rail of a fence. And we're looking over the fence into the neighbor's yard, and we're seeing stuff that he has, but the commandment says, thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not covet. So you don't want what the neighbor has so badly that you're going to steal it, all right? Don't covet. Wow, that's pretty cool, isn't it? So number 1 is one God. Number 2 is don't worship any other gods. Don't make idols, don't bow down to them. Number 3 is don't swear. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Number 4 is remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy. Number 5 is honor father and mother. Obey mommy and daddy. Number 6 is don't kill. Number 7 is keep marriage sacred. Don't commit adultery. Number 8 is don't steal. Don't steal. Number 9 is don't say bad things about your neighbors. Don't tell lies. And number 10 is don't look over the fence to see what your neighbor has that you might want. All right. So those 10 are God's special commandments. King David said, blessed is the man, happy is the man whose delight is in the law, who and in his law doth meditate day and night. He's like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth his fruit in his season. His leaf shall not wither, and whatsoever he does shall prosper. Love does no harm to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. There are those who profess to serve God. They pretend to serve God while they rely on their own efforts to try to obey his law. They try to form a right character and they try to secure salvation through their own works. Their hearts are not moved by any deep sense of the love of Christ. They don't really love the Lord. They just try and obey him out of a duty. They seek to perform the duties of the Christian life as that which God requires them in order to gain heaven. And that religion is worth zero. That religion is worth nothing at all. It's sad, isn't it? The commandments we don't keep the commandments just because they're rules. We don't keep them as a list of rules. We obey them because we love Jesus. All obedience, all true obedience must come from the heart. That means there is false obedience. And you can obey, but when you don't obey from the heart, that's led people to even crucify Christ. They kept the Sabbath, they had the laws, they had the health laws, they didn't eat unclean food and all that kind of thing. They read the scriptures in order that they could have eternal life, but they did not come to Christ that they could have real life. They did not give their hearts to them, and there was no real love in all that. Deep love from the heart is the only true love. Everything else is mere talk, dry formality, and heavy drudgery. When we see the law as based on eternal principle of love, then breaking the law is not seen as breaking a rule. It's seen as damaging a relationship. That's the key. Because the 10 Commandments are about a relationship. The first 4 commandments are all about our relationship with God, and the last 6 are about our relationship with each other. So when we break these laws, we are actually damaging our relationships. And we were made for relationships. So when we break those sacred connections with ourselves and with God, we hurt ourselves. And of course, we hurt our Heavenly Father for sure. It makes him very sad. Recently, the museum in Sydney, Australia, hosted a mental health exhibit. And they had a giant wall there. And on that wall were a number of words associated with mental illness, and especially with depression and anxiety. You know, depression and anxiety are rampant today. They're just like out of control. And you'll notice what is the most prominent word there on that wall. What was the principal message that they were trying to emphasize? Obviously, isolation, right? You know, did you know that isolation is a leading cause of mental illness, particularly depression and anxiety? See, we're talking about created for connection. When we sever those connections, we become isolated from people. It's a leading cause of mental illness, particularly depression and anxiety. Now, here's a definition of depression according to John Rady. John Rady is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He says, depression is an erosion of connections. Depression is an erosion of connections. What kinds of connections? Well, actually, connections among people, but also connections among our brain cells. And there are things that we can do to damage the connections in our brain cells that bring about depression. Dr. Neil Nedley has come up with over 100 hits, he calls them, that can damage those connections in your brain cells. Everything from what you eat, nutrition, of course, heredity, that can be a part of it, trauma, if you have an accident and hit your head, have a concussion. But of all those hits, isolation is huge. On this exhibit, they also mentioned that when people feel isolated, the stress hormone cortisol floods their bodies. In fact, one scientific study found that when people are experiencing the stress of relationship, their levels of cortisol are as high as when somebody is beating you up, when you're being attacked physically. Amazing. If you're in isolation, your levels of cortisol are as high as when you're being attacked. They also discovered that when people are in isolation, they feel anxious, they have low self-esteem, they're pessimistic. They tend to think in terms of worst-case scenarios, and they are chronically afraid. So guess what? In the prison system, what's the worst punishment? They call it isolated confinement. And some say that that is worse than torture even. We need each other. It is part of what makes us healthy. We need those connections with one another. Here's a question for you. Does social media harm or help relationships? Keeps you connected, right? So it should help relationships because it keeps you connected, but you know what? It doesn't. It's exactly the opposite. We can acquire knowledge, and the cell phones and computers are great devices for all kinds of things, and we can communicate easier with others. That's true. We can make phone calls and we can work from home. Good stuff. But the other aspects of these devices have a huge negative impact on our health. They're not good for us. Excessive use of these devices tends to make people feel anxious, depressed, socially isolated. And that is something we didn't really anticipate back in 2007 when these devices became popular. But now we have a 24/7 companion that uses an algorithm that probably understands us in some ways better than we even understand ourselves. It's a 24/7 companion. And how do you feel when you're without your cell phone these days? It's just something that's got to be there, right? If you don't have your cell phone, man, it's panic city. You've got to find out where it is. Unfortunately, for many people, especially young people, it's a source of addiction. It has actually eroded real connections. And so we're going to look at some of the stats. An average kid will spend more time in front of a screen by the age of 6 than he will spend in conversation with his father or mother in his entire life. So how do we deal with this responsibly? Are we using it, or is it using and abusing us? What is happening is that people withdraw into this device in social situations. That's a problem, and we need to realize it's a serious problem. The average person spends 4 times more time on social media than in actual face-to-face social connecting. 4 times longer in our virtual world than in reality. This is something that has come upon us so quickly that we haven't really been prepared for it. Like, you prepare for, if you're going to drive a car, going to learn to drive a car, you got to prepare for it, right? Or a motorcycle, or any kind of dangerous device, you need to prepare for it. But there's no training and no preparation for the use of these devices, which are so powerful and potentially so dangerous to our health and our happiness. So, nobody talks much about the potential danger that these devices pose to our mental health and our social relationships. Interestingly, Renee and Mike mentioned that starting in September, the 2 provinces of Alberta and Ontario are prohibiting the students to bring their devices to school. They're not allowed to take their devices to school anymore in those 2 provinces starting September. That's what they said. The Wall Street Journal had an article. It says most teens prefer to chat online rather than in person. Prefer to chat online rather than in person. And I think we're changing the meaning of the word to chat, right? Hey, I want to just chat with you for a while. Well, that means what? Texting. And you can say the same thing about married couples. And I'm sure you've noticed it. You go to a restaurant and here's a couple sitting down at the table, and what are they doing? They're not talking to each other. They're texting on their devices. Rather chat with each other than engage in face-to-face communication. Average couple in Canada is spending in face-to-face communication without any distractions only 35 minutes a week, it is claimed. Less than an hour a week. We are at a place where it's actually detrimental to our health, the way we use these devices. Most 11-year-olds have never climbed a tree. And when researchers asked these 11-year-olds if they'd like to climb a tree, they said, well, we didn't even know we could climb a tree. When given the opportunity, and the kids did climb a tree, then the researchers asked them to describe their experience. How was it? What was it like? Well, some said it was kind of scary, but you know what all of them said? We couldn't wait to get down so we could go play our video game. Many kids, when they go to school, cannot hold a pencil. Well, I don't suppose that's terribly unusual, but I remember back several years ago when I was a principal of an elementary school. Before school started one September, I went to visit my kindergarten teacher who was setting up her classroom. And I chatted with her about the students that would be coming into kindergarten that year. What she told me really shocked me, because you know what she said? She said, the first thing I have to teach these kids is how to play. I have to teach them how to play, because they've grown up in homes in front. The babysitter is the television at that time. And now, of course, the babysitter is the device, because we have a great-granddaughter who's about 1.5 years, and she's already messing with those things, pushing those buttons and seeing the pictures on the screen. Children spend twice as much time on video games alone than on all outdoor activities combined. And here's another statistic. 3/4 of children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates. 3/4 of children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates. And you know what? Outdoors is a healthy place. Sunshine is good for you. Fresh air is good for you. Exercise is good for you. So that's where you need to be. You know what Ellen White says? That little children should be as free as lambs. As free as lambs. Not going to school, not sitting at desks, not playing video games, but out in nature. You know, when I was a kid, I liked being outside. And I'd spend my summers outside fishing and even sleeping outside. I like to sleep out under the stars. And of course, homework and piano practice, they kept me inside some of the time, but I didn't like practicing the piano. I didn't like homework, so I spent as little time as possible doing those things. But now the kids are in the house all the time. It's hard to get them out. This former Facebook executive, Klamath Palihapitiya, he says, it literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of our society. And you know, there's a number of these executives apparently that are just abandoning, they're just selling off these companies like Instagram and so on, because they realize that how damaging it is to society. We can't do this anymore. Our conscience won't allow us to. We realize that we have created toys, and now these toys are taking over the world. In reality, these sites and apps are designed to train our minds to crave frequent rewards. They make us hungry for hearts and likes. So once you've been conditioned to need these reinforcements, it's very hard to live in the real world, because it doesn't offer as frequent and as immediate rewards as this virtual world does. And because of this instant gratification. So here's the thing. We see a kid outside, maybe, rarely, but we see a kid outside playing in the dirt, and you look at that kid and say, oh, look, he's getting dirty, or she's getting dirty, all dirty. And you look at the kid sitting inside with a nice, clean iPad, and everything looks wonderful. You don't understand that the person in the dirt has a clean and sanitized mind. The one with the clean and sanitized laptop is actually filling his mind with junk. Okay? So out in nature, it's the best place for kids to be. It's the best place for all of us to be, actually. So let our kids go out there in the sun and fresh air and in the snow. That's good, healthy stuff. That's how we were created, to use our imaginations and to interact with nature and not have our imaginations catered to so that we don't use our imaginations anymore. It's told to us, and it's so sad to see that. But when we actually see kids that are actually playing games with simple things like rocks and wood and grass, those kids are the healthy ones. We need to see more of that, but we're not. We're seeing less and less of that. So this craving will drive you to pick up your phone more than you would if you had never been plugged into the system. You will break away from your work and your relationships to seek a sweet, sweet bit of the ever-exciting virtual world. We are fighting against something that is too powerful for us. So here's the thing. It's not that we need to completely ban these devices, but there is a conversation that needs to take place. Maybe even within our own selves. We need to talk to ourselves about our use of these devices. And for sure with our kids. And just sit down with them and kindly and lovingly, but explain to them what's happening and help them make their own choice, particularly depending on their age. Now, if they're small, mommy and daddy need to be the mind for their children. I see today that parents with very tiny children, they ask their kids everything. Would you like this? Would you like that? Where is the parent? Where is the one that decides for the child? Now, I know that shouldn't happen for the whole of the lifetime. As a child grows up, he needs to learn to take responsibility for himself. But those early years, the parent is the mind for the child. Should be. But help the child, depending on the age, to come up with their own decision, because that's the only one that's going to last. If you impose on a 13-year-old rules and regulations that they're not happy with, they're just going to be rebellious. They might submit for a time, but underneath, things just kind of boil away. Okay. You were designed to make real connections, not only with one another, but with God. When you do, you're happier and healthier. We are created for connections, not only with one another, but with God. Here are 3 pictures of people in relationship. They're special to me because it's all my wife's family, and some of those are my family too. On the left is the one of our family reunion just last weekend. And the middle one is of our great-granddaughter and her mommy and daddy. And the one on the right is my wife and her 3 sisters. So it was interesting that after that weekend was over, several of them said this was the very best weekend ever. And but while we're apart, of course, technology is great because we can keep in touch with it. In one study, it was shown how isolated people are 3 times more likely to catch a cold. 3 times more likely to catch a cold than people who had close face-to-face meaningful connections. You'd think that'd be the other way around because you catch a cold from being close to people, right? Also, there's another study by Professor Martha McClintock who separated lab rats. Some were raised in a cage alone, others were raised in groups. And she determined that the isolated rats were 84 times more likely to develop cancer tumors than those who lived in community. So loneliness itself, according to evidence, is deadly. Maybe you've heard of this guy, King Frederick II of Germany. Years ago, he decided to do an experiment. He wanted to learn what language people would speak if they did not hear any language at all. If there was an innate something inside of a person that would permit them to speak maybe an original language, maybe the language of Adam and Eve, or maybe the German language because he was German, or maybe whatever. So you know what he did? He got all the babies he could from orphanages, little newborns, and he had their caregivers not speak to them at all. They could feed them with a bottle, they could change their diapers, and they could cover them with a blanket when they needed, but they were not to touch them, and they were not to speak to them. Just leave them alone. You know what language they learned? They learned no language at all. Why? Because they were all dead before a year old. Amazing. Amazing. Terrible. Actually, you don't need a lot of contact to simply save the life of those children. Children have grown up in orphanages, and I think years ago they probably didn't get much TLC, touching and loving. But I think orphanages today are a little better off. I think they realize the importance of touch, and so they encourage volunteers even to come and hold babies and feed them and just be with them. We need people to love us. Without love, even adults lose their appetite and they have problems sleeping. And it's hard to experience joy even in nature. It's hard to imagine life without love. But when we are designed for connections. Genesis 2 verse 18 says, "It is not good for a man to be alone." And it's not just talking about marriage. It's talking about us as creatures. We need connections. We were created for these. God designed us in His image. And you know, He's three. He's 3 in 1. He's got connection among Himself. Actually, that's a strong evidence that God is plural, because God is love. And if He were only one, that would be narcissistic. But 3. God is 3. And God designed us in His image with a longing for connections. Yet this world is filled with so many isolated and disconnected people. According to Susan Pinkner, people who live the longest are those who prioritize and groom their relationships throughout their lifestyle. People who set a high priority on their relationships create a biological force field against disease and decline. Yeah, I think that happily married couples tend to live longer. So when we have strong social connections, we're going to be healthier, but we're also going to live longer. The presence of significant daily social interactions and close relationships are the strongest predictors of how long you live and how happy you will be. Got it? The presence of significant daily social interactions and close relationships are the strongest predictors of how long you will live and how happy you will be. So here's the big question. How do you live long and stay healthy and happy when you get older? Or if you could live to be 100 and be happy and healthy? Well, the blue zones are places around the world that National Geographic has studied where people live longer than the average population. Loma Linda, California is one of those. It's the only one in North America, as a fact. It's a group of Seventh-day Adventists that live there. They have a high number of centenarians, people who live to be 100 and more. And these people are healthy and happy. So the big question is, what do these 5 regions have in common? Well, researchers found 9 factors, common factors. A regular activity, life purpose, practice daily sacred rituals, like prayer, don't overeat, eat mostly plants, eat antioxidant-rich foods, have a meaningful social life, have religious involvement, Did you know that by going to church once a week, you can add to your life? How many years do you think you'd add to your life by simply going to church once a week? They claim 14 years. Wow. Let's see. And family first. Here's an interesting, it's not a food chart. It is a mental health chart. All those things at the top of the pyramid, you can do yourself. In the yellow, green, and blue parts, you can do all that stuff yourself. But the bottom part, the dark part at the bottom, you must have other people to do it with. You can do daily activities by yourself. You can be purpose-driven and practice daily sacred rituals by yourself. You can eat by yourself. But that's not that much fun. I proved that again this week because my wife's been gone. But you can do it by yourself. I managed. But now, at the base of the pyramid, take a look. What does it say? Strong social, spiritual, and family connections. The base is what matters most. It's the base upon which everything else is built. And that is the basis for our health and happiness. Research says that the two most dangerous times in your life are the first year and the year you retire. And that year you retire is the time when you disconnect from your old associates, do something different. So that's a tough time in life. Connections are the key component to living longer. So, love is actual, real medicine. As bees need a hive, humans need a tribe. We are all like cell phones, constantly looking for connections. Think about a baby. What is the first thing they do when they're born? They cry. But put the baby on mommy's chest, and what happens? Baby stops crying. So, what does the Bible say? 2 Corinthians 7. For indeed, when we came to Macedonia, our bodies had no rest. But we were troubled on every side. Outside were conflicts. Inside were fears. Nevertheless, God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of whom? Titus. Whom did God send? He sent Titus. He was a friend. And God shows his love for us by sending people into our lives. People that bring us comfort and presence and connection. Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he said, "Oh, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Could you stay here and watch with me?" He was pleading with his disciples. I need you. I need you. This is the hardest time of my life. Can you come help me? The book Desire of Ages points out the human heart longs for sympathy and suffering. This longing Christ felt to the very depths of his being. In the supreme agony of his soul, he came to his disciples. Okay, we're going to wrap up. I want to give an illustration of a square, a rectangle. And in the four corners are going to be four types of connections. We connect with people in four different ways. In the upper left, we're going to start with no connection. This is the lonely place. Can you be lonely in a crowd? Yes. Can you be lonely in church? Yes. Can you be lonely at home? Yes. In your workplace, you can be lonely most any place on this earth. It's not fun being in a corner where there's no connection. The second corner, there is some connection, but that connection is a bad connection. It's a bad connection because you never feel good enough. You're connected with people who always find fault with you. You try hard, and it's never good enough. And it's always pointed out to you. There are masters and there are disasters in relationships. The masters are looking for things to appreciate, and the disasters are looking for things to criticize. What's wrong? This is wrong. That is wrong. Never good enough. That's bad connection. So you kind of bounce around from corner to corner. You're in a bad relationship, so maybe you retire and go off on your own. Go back to the no connection corner. There's a third corner, but unfortunately it is fake connection. These connections are fake because they're only temporary and they don't last very long. That corner is the one you go to when you have addictions. It might be alcohol, it might be shopping, it might be food. When you're involved in those things, you feel relief, but it's only temporary. It feels good, but it doesn't last. It might be something you're trying to achieve, like a goal you're set for. You're trying to make more money, you're trying to get more status for a promotion at work, whatever it is. You just do it and do it and do it. It feels good while you're doing it, but it's only temporary, and that pleasure goes away. So it's a fake connection. So you go back to retiring away from people and being by yourself again, or you can even go back to the bad connection. But thank God we have corner number 4. And in that corner, we have authentic relationships. Authentic relationships. But there's a door into that corner. I see that my slide is not working properly. So I'll try and get caught up by bringing this illustration up to speed here. Okay, so there's a door there. And that last corner, you have to go through this door. And to get into authentic relationships, you have to go through this door. And do you know what this door is called? You know what you have to do to have an authentic relationship? You have to be vulnerable. And that takes courage, because people have let you down. People have hurt you. But you have to have faith that the people on the other side of that door will be different, that they're going to be supportive, that you can trust them. And that's the only place that you can find peace and joy, is in the authentic corner. Drawing all these lines here, they go crisscross everywhere. We can jump around from one type of relationship to another, but it's important to try and stay in authentic relationships. Our churches are to be places of authentic connection, which means that we need to accept one another. We need to love one another as we are, right? Sometimes that's a hard thing, because we don't even love ourselves oftentimes as we are. It's a difficult thing to love the life that we have, not the life of our dreams. Many of us have never had the life of our dreams. But to accept the life that we have and to realize what we have is very important. Remember, God is looking at you and saying, I'm with you, I'm holding you, and you can have joy even in the life you have right now without regrets. But you need to stay in that place of authentic connection. God accepts you. It's achievable, but it's not achievable without Jesus. And when we do that, fear can take over. And sometimes we're like on one of those roundabouts where we just run off to the bad connection corner and run back, and then we run off to the no connection corner and run back. But to be healthy and happy, we need to be coming back to the corner of healthy relationships, authentic relationships. All right, wrap it up. And this is something really cool. This is something I hope you'll remember. This is what God says of himself. Let my people make me a sanctuary. Why? That I may dwell with them. I want to be with them. I want to have a connection with them. And sometimes we run away from him. But you know what? He runs faster. By his grace, he says, I want to dwell with you. That's the whole purpose of the sanctuary. The devil wants to destroy the fabric of our society. Interesting. There was this demon-possessed man. And you know, the demons always knew who Jesus was. And Jesus went to heal him. Speaking out of that man was a voice. And you know what he said? Leave us alone. That's exactly what the devil wants you to think. He wants you to think that you're best off by yourself. But you're not. You are unhealthy by yourself. You need connections. And Jesus goes after this man, and he hears the cry of his heart and not the words of the demons. And he sends those demons out of that man and gives that man a sense of peace. When you want people to know that Jesus is there to love them as they are, they don't need to be alone in a corner saying, I can get my pleasure out of my device, and I can get my pleasure on my own, doing my own thing. No, we need each other just as hard as that may be. Love is the only place where that can be found. So here it is. The entire Bible can be summed up in one word. Pick the Bible up out of the pew in front of you and have a look at it. Feel it in your hand. And think to yourself, what one word would summarize that whole entire Bible? And think about what you've just heard, the message today. The Bible and what you just heard. That what one word expresses the entire message of the Bible. What do you think it is? It's a 4-letter word, but it's actually a preposition. Here's the word. The word is, how many got it? But think about it. Think about it. With is the reason Jesus came to planet Earth. Matthew 1:23, behold, the virgin shall be with child and give birth to a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's beautiful, isn't it? God with us. This is his whole purpose. He wants to be with us. God reveals who he is in his Son, Jesus Christ. For in Jesus Christ dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. All the fullness, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all the fullness of the Godhead dwelt in Jesus Christ. Remember the thief on the cross? He calls out, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, assuredly I say to you today, you will, what? Be with me. You will be with me in paradise. He wants you to be with him in paradise. He wants you to be with him in paradise. He wants me. He wants us all to be with him. So with is the reason Jesus came to the planet, and with is the reason why he's coming back. Here's another beautiful promise. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Where I am, there you may be also. He came to this earth to be with us. In the end, we're going to heaven to be with him. But with is where it's at. There are more prophecies about the second coming of Christ in the Old and New Testaments than there are about any other event. Why is that? Because Jesus longs to be with us eternally. So go to the end of the Bible, and what does it say? He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. That's his purpose for you. He wants you to experience that right now. That connection, that eternal connection, connecting with him eternally right now. And he's a forever friend. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. A mother may forget her child of her womb, but Jesus says, I'll never forget you. I'll bear you up on eagle's wings. How close is that? I will gather you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. How close is that? Because I love you with an everlasting love. It is with loving kindness that I'm drawing you to me. And so it's with love we need to respond to Jesus by keeping his commandments, by obeying him. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this insight into your word, that you want to be with us, you want to connect with us. I pray, Father, that you'll give us strength to and faith to move through the door of vulnerability and into the corner of authentic relationships with one another and with you. We want to be honest and open with everybody, and to realize that you're with us and will never leave us or forsake us. You are our forever friend. You want to be with us. You're making a plan so that we can be together forever. And we love you and we thank you for that. So bless us in Jesus' name. Amen.